My name is Tim. Good morning. I'm Michael Dunn, the Vice A little short, may notice this morning. Tennis wall tower is currently away. I'm relatively as for understandable reasons. And what John has done well, and thank him for his time. First item on the agenda, approval of meeting minutes. Actually, I'm going to make the motion to accept minutes. I'll make the motion for the minutes, accept the minutes, and I'll let someone second. Any questions, comments, changes?
That was money that was set aside, waiting to see how the OPEB investments would start. So I won't call it a retirement fund, just so much it was intended part of OPEB and was never made to be part until.
Any other questions? In favor of accepting minutes as provided, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. The other portion of our minutes, was the statement we received regarding the closed session, which occurred. Before we get into that, I just want to highlight the whole process we went through in order to recommend new board members to the county commission. We initially received a response by 14 individuals. However, 3 did not either elect to attend interviews, or in one case dropped out of the. So we really were working with 11 individuals to really fill 9 openings, or not 9 openings, but 9 slots that we had to provide to the county commissioners, which really was a primary recommendation that would come from the board and 2 alternates. And again, because of Tom Russell's resignation, we were looking for 3 positions to be filled. So again, I'll ask you then I'll make the motion to accept the closing meeting minutes. If I can get a second. Second. Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor of accepting the minutes, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. A motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the EALs, and those not familiar with it, those are really the report we receive of expenses that have occurred since the last meeting. So I'll make the motion to accept the EALs. And if I can get a second.
Second.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, any questions, comments? I'll ask the first one, which may be on everyone's mind, is what is lyrasis?
Lyrasis.
Lyrasis.
That comes from a grant from the state. That is the funding for the Palace app, which I'm the project manager for deploying that statewide. And it is live. St. Mary's County is live. If you want to download your Palace app to your iOS or Android device, it has all of the content that we get from Overdrive, which is represented in another app, Libby, plus content from the Digital Public Library of America, including 4 titles that we own the copyright on and have digitized. So that's just something that is a pass-through. The state gives us money and we give it to Lyrasis. They host the app. They troubleshoot the app. If anybody has problems with it, they fix them. So that's where that money is.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have one on the back of that sheet if you can. So ASCII and ASCII, as I understand it from a previous meeting, they're going to maintain the name, but the principals are retiring. Is that correct?
I have no
That is
idea.
correct, yes. Kathy and Bob are retiring, but the firm for now is keeping its name. They are still attending to some affairs at the firm, but I imagine come the new year that they will be looking not to be involved anymore.
Does that present us with an opportunity where we should be out looking for a replacement?
I don't think that we're at all dissatisfied with ASCII and ASCII's services. It certainly could. And the issue would be who to be looking at in county. And we'd like to keep services in county when we can. And I don't know of any other firm that does quite as much of this kind of work. But if you're interested in having us look into it, we can.
Well, I just think maybe, because I don't know when they got it, how far back. They're not inexpensive. They do a nice job. They're not inexpensive. But if the primaries are going to transfer out of the firm, as I say, maybe it's an opportunity that we should be back on the street looking, and maybe we'll stay with them. I don't know.
Well, we can look in county and see if there's similar providers. They have such a large clientele base in the Southern Maryland area because they are one of the ones who do a full accounting for firms, and there's not all that many more, but we can look at the market.
Yeah, my suggestion, Michael, is to look at who's out there and then present it to the
And then
board,
decide.
and then they can decide from that point on what to do. Any other questions? Okay, I'll make. Excuse me. Okay, all in favor of accepting the EALs, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, Trustee, you're really not up for a report, but
Well, I do,
since we're going quarterly, but certainly if you have some information.
I
let's
do
share.
want to give an update on the Vanguard signature thing.
Okay,
That's been
good.
such a difficulty. I did finally reach someone who was able to actually help me, gave me correct information.
Okay.
They changed the email address to mine, so things inside the account are changed. I sent in all the corrected paperwork. There was a lot of issues to it that I don't want to get into, but everything is now finally on track. As soon as that goes through, she's going to help me set us up so we have electronic direct access to the accounts. We don't have to do all this nonsense.
Okay, good, good. Thank you.
Congrats, Tressa.
Yes.
It's been a challenge.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Smirla, now I'm going to give you a little bit of an update. Tom Russell has been the representative for the board on the Smirla board. But since he, again, I mentioned earlier, has resigned, I spoke to the CEO of Smirla and indicated that currently we don't have a representative from the board directly. Now, you may recall that the Smirla board consists of 3 members from each county. And the way the bylaws are written, there are 2 board members who are active on the county boards, plus 1 member from the community can be chosen to represent the county. We've done so, and Beth Roth, who some of you may know was a former member of this board, is representing St. Mary's County currently. And now I have also mentioned in prior meetings that the state was looking to change some of the laws and regulations that relate to Smirla and its structure and primarily its board composition. And in that legislation, which I'm not sure when it's going to be passed, but it'll be this year, basically the structure of the Smirla board will be 1 member from the county boards and then 1 member from the community. And there is some discussion as to do they need to codify what a member of the community means? And do we satisfy that with having a member who was also a former member of this board or not? So I spoke to Beth Roth, and she will continue to represent St. Mary's County for the duration until the next election, which will occur in March or April. They basically set their meetings on a month or two ahead of time, based primarily on weather, if that's a factor. So, but it typically is in the March timeframe. So she will continue to serve until that time, would prefer to come off. But again, we will need to have additional or new members go on the board, one from this board, and then one from the community to represent again St. Mary's County. So again, that's an issue that unfortunately will carry over to the next board and the next board president. Okay, Michael, then we're up to you.
All right, well, thank you. I'd like to start with a recognition of the Lexington Park Library, which opened in October of 2002 and is now 20 years old. And I'm pleased to thank the county commissioners for putting some money in the capital funds for fiscal year 28, I believe it is, to do some renovations here and at Charlotte Hall. It's still a lovely facility, and yet it's showing its age in some ways. So we're looking forward to having some new developments here at the Lexington Park Library. But congratulations to the staff here for 20 great years of service to the public. We'll begin by looking at the fiscal year 23 budget overview, and you have the budget handout, and those are available on board docs to the public. All these things should be publicly available. So at 38% of the year past, we have expended 35% of the budget. So we're a little ahead, and yet there are some areas, and I'd like to thank Belinda Belinda Lloyd for preparing some talking points on this budget, some areas that are of concern and that we may have to address as budget amendments as the year goes on, but certainly consider adjusting the budget for next year. And we will have a budget due to the county in January. It should be approved by the incoming board members. We can have a suggested budget ready for you in December, but that would not include the new board members. So because our meeting would be after the budget is due, we may have to have a special session just to have members look at the budget and say yes to it. And it wouldn't have to be a closed session, but we may end up having to do that. In any case, here are some areas where the expense is a little higher, and then if you have questions about it, please feel free to ask. The Lexi Electric, Water, Sewer, and Trash is over budget. Basically, the really warm weather continued all the way up to about 2 weeks ago. We were seeing, in some cases, record temperatures, and we had quite high usage in the summer, and there has been an increase in utility costs, water and electricity. So that could be the reason for that. The admin phones, that's going to increase and may end up going over budget before the year's over. We're adding 2 new phones for the mobile librarians, and you'll be able to meet the mobile library staff later on today. The Lexi and Leon phones are probably going to increase. We've got some added fees from Breeze Line. I see that there's going to be a new cable provider here in county, and we may have to look at transferring services. Our programs have used quite a bit of funds, and primarily that's because the summer performers, materials, and supplies were higher than in past years. The performers are asking for more in part because they need to travel. Supplies have simply gone up in costs. So we're looking at inflation sort of impacting the library budget as well as everybody else's budget. Smyrna tuition reimbursement. We try to guarantee a certain amount, at least, is it 1,500 for each employee?
It'll be 2,000. It'll be 2,000 for each employee right now, because we have 5 on tuition reimbursement, and we only get 10,000 back from Smyrna. We've agreed to pay 500 more for each of those from our staff development budget. So that will really only cover one semester of each of their tuitions. And this is for an entire year of tuition.
So go ahead.
We did ask Smarla if they would consider giving us more money for tuition reimbursement. And they said they would consider it, but they really couldn't tell us right now. It's up to their board.
Thank you, Mary Ann and Belinda. That will be a decision for their board, of course. Obviously, it's wonderful that we have so many people seeking advanced degrees. And in some cases, the state requires a certain level of degree in order for a person to have a position in the library. So this is wonderful. It'll allow us to have a more diverse employee base, but it's not inexpensive. Copier usage and leases. We are going to be updating the lease for the copier. It's going to be an additional little bit per month. It's really only an additional $100 a month. And to get new copiers and to have sort of more efficient machines. So that's not going to, it'll increase a little bit beyond the budgeted amount, but for a very, very good reason.
Where is that line on the budget, Michael?
It's under IT and it's copiers, IT copiers.
Thank you.
Your questions then?
Noticed with the electric use specifically, didn't see looking for like Leonardtown and Charlotte Hall, there wasn't much usage listed, whereas the cost for Lexington Park was considerably over.
Well, Lexington Park is a large building with a lot of windows and not the most efficient HVA system. So I'm going to say that that's probably going to be more of the reason for that. Leonardtown probably gets as much use on the computers, for example, but I'm going to say it's probably mostly going to be the heating and that's going to be responsible for that, air conditioning, especially at this time.
Michael, also, we don't have Leonardtown's bills yet because the county is very slow in getting to us we aren't even up to date with those.
Okay. Was Leonardtown built with more energy efficiency with
well, the HVA system is 18 years newer, and yes, it was built to try to get to a silver LEED standard, although we didn't seek certification because it's very expensive to do that, and we wanted to spend our $50,000 on the building as opposed to getting it certified. But yes, it's a much more efficient system. I should note that at Leonardtown, we did receive a final amended lease for Leonardtown from the county that splits the amount between the senior center and the library. Other questions? Well, again, thank you, Belinda.
Just a note, another
Yes.
comment though, my earlier discussion about Sperla, I think I appreciate pursuing the issue of increasing that amount for tuition. That's why we need representation on that board so that we can advocate for things like that.
Well, we'll move to the mobile library update then, and I'm going to go all Charles Dickens on you. It's the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times, I'm very happy to introduce you to our two new mobile library staff, and that's Sandy Kleist and Rosa Nakamoto, and they are right over there. And I would please feel free to say just a couple words if you would like.
Hi, I'm Sandy Kleist. I'm going to be the new mobile library outreach coordinator. I'm very excited about taking this on and this new path that we're heading into with the library. And just thank you for having me and for supporting this venture.
I'm Rosa Nakamoto, and I'll be the mobile librarian.
And Rosa is bilingual, fluent in Spanish, and I think is going to give us an opportunity to try to reach an underserved sort of portion of the community that we've been trying to increase the use by. And I think having that outreach into that community is going to be an exciting part of this initiative. We had also started to order the collection for the mobile library. And the reason why we were hiring and ordering the collection and really ramping up is that we were expecting the mobile library in December. Now, the worst of times, the mobile library has been delayed again. This is not due to anything that we've done or even our contractor on the Eastern Shore has done. There was just such a high demand for the vehicle and the supply chain issues and inflation, blah, 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 blah. In any case, it is now going to be delivered to them in April and to us probably in June. So a year after it was supposed to be on the road. We're very disappointed about that. Sandy and Rosa will be doing some work on outreach and doing some work as kind of a mobile staff where when we may have needs at one of the other branches. And so they're going to be getting some training. So we are perfectly happy to move forward that way. The orders will not be placed or are being video orders have been placed. We're going to hold off on the book orders until about March. And those should all arrive in time to get the library up and running. But obviously, as I say, this is beyond our control, but we're incredibly disappointed about it.
I'll be glad to see that. And a couple of years ago, a number of years ago, we looked at the division of cards for the library and geographically. And what we found was south of the base. I guess we always use that as a point of reference. It was lower. So I think that's where the mobile library really can be beneficial, is to moving into areas where it's much more difficult for people to travel north to go to the library. So it'll be a great benefit, especially in that area geographically.
Michael, are either of these two ladies going to drive?
I imagine they're both going to drive. You don't have to have a commercial driver's license. We've asked the county if they have any kind of a driver's safety for larger vehicles. And so the mobile library is going to be pretty much like driving a pickup in terms of the size of the, but a pickup with a very large thing on the back. If anybody's ever driven a U-Haul, a larger U-Haul, that's pretty much the size we're talking here. So it's, well, cumbersome, it's not going to be unmanageable. It will have 4 cameras that sort of show you the view all around for when you're driving, especially backing up. And so, yes, they're going to be driving the library. Now, we've thought about, are there going to be times when we've only got 2 outreach staff, and most of the other counties, with outreach close to us have at least 4. So there might be times when other administration people will be driving the van with one of them on board. So we know that's going to be a challenge, and we're sort of making sure that we're addressing it.
I know it's soon yet, but do we have to itemize that on our vehicle insurance, or is it a blanket coverage for anything?
Yeah, we're going to have to add that. And we've already talked with the insurance company. What they want before they'll give us a quote on it is a vehicle identification number. And until we have the vehicle, we don't know the vehicle identification number. So we'll be able to get at least that when it's delivered in April and get it insured already. We had to do that as part of applying for the statewide grant that Delegate Crosby helped us get. So yeah, we will be seeing an increase, but it will be for really next fiscal year.
Okay, so how much roughly do you think by delivery time we will be over what we originally thought this was going to cost?
For the total cost of the vehicle, about $17,000 is going to be the amount over what the original quote was. And that is all due to the increase in the truck costs. It's not the collection or anything like that.
Do we get any kind of discount or compensation, or is there any recourse from all of these delays from the manufacturer?
We're not dealing directly with the manufacturer. I think that we only got the one bid to finish the vehicle. I think it's a fair price, given the inflation that's happened. And I would be more aggressive about that if it were somehow their fault or they hadn't been completely, on the ball about it. I think they are. It's just unfortunate. Again, there was a huge demand for vehicles, a lot of them funded with ARPA funds, which in fact ours is too. Well, we did receive the OPED actuary report, which is good because we needed that as part of our audit. And I did provide you with the most recent statement of what the account is worth. But the OPEB statements just basically look at current amounts and future possibilities, what we're going to need to fully fund. And I will have to say that with the fund being worth quite a bit less than it was at the start of the year, again, through no fault of ours, it's just that the stock market has taken a pounding. That getting to that fully funded amount is going to be a challenge for us. We will look at the audit and see what overage is there and possibly put some money towards it. I'm pleased to see that at least it's worth more at the end of last month than it was at the beginning of last month.
Just a couple of comments. Like I did look at because there were two attachments that you provided, two pieces of material. I looked at the one that really talks about the fiscal years 2024-25. I think it's important to understand about the OPEB plan in particular. Obviously, people who work for the library are aware, but I think it's good to know that for us, that number one, it's a supplemental plan. In other words, it's not primary to Medicare. It's not in lieu of Medicare. It's supplemental. In fact, it's a very restrictive plan too. I thought the number of alternatives you have are more restrictive than what I've seen in corporate environments. The current retirees who are pre-Medicare, in other words, they would rely on this plan as their principal coverage, but there is no one in that category according to the report. And so, 11 individuals are currently receiving Medicare and the supplemental plan. So, again, I don't want to minimize the importance of this particular plan, but understand in terms of the implications and the cost factor, it's not as extensive as others I've seen. I actually have supplemental through the military, and frankly, it's much more generous than even this plan offers. Only 36 employees are eligible, and there's no dental or life insurance. So I think it's important to understand that this is not necessarily a rich plan that really costs a lot. I think it's because it is supplemental, its cost is not considerable. So again, just an observation. I've worked in HR, so I know a little bit more about these types of plans. So just to share with you some insights from my review of it. But again, that's just a personal note.
I do have a question on page 1 of the squab statement. This is a little weird. I mean, there's a lot of numbers floating around in this document, but on, well, page 3 of 9 is how it is in the lower right-hand corner. So we had credits of $13.40 and 72 cents. We reinvested $13.35.05. Why are we missing $4 or $5? I don't think it's a deal breaker. I just want to know where it went.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I would have to ask. I would have to ask.
Am I looking at that right? Money in, reinvested?
I can get an answer for you from the company that oversees the funding at this point. And so we're at $1,174,032.29 is the value, which is substantially down from the 1.4 million it was at the start of the year. You have in the past raised concerns that the fund was not meeting the targets set by the people who are I know that you are recently talking with a local bank about the possibility of having the fund change hands. Did you want to give an update on that or?
Yep, I will. So at the last meeting, and I think there's a document in here, everything we knew from Edward Jones, which is a brokerage firm, is somewhere in these documents. Since then, one of the attorneys representing Jones and working with an entirely different client, something came up in that relationship that caused him to get back to the Jones rep here in county. It has something to do with, and he did not discuss what it is, I don't know, but it has something to do with a Maryland statute. And he wanted our legal rep, Mr. Brewster, to link up with him so they could discuss whether whatever that was did or did not impact a possible relationship between the library and Jones. That's all kind of murky, but that's all I've got. Now, he has tried several times to contact Mr. Brewster, but without success. I called last week upon learning about this disconnect. I called last week, had to leave a message, asked for a call back, did not get anything. Called again Friday. I got a real person, but I think she was an answering service. She told me Mr. Brewster was out for the week, but she would pass along the message that there is a Jones attorney been trying to get in touch with him. I will follow up again this week to see if I can push that along. Again, I apologize. I don't know what the so-called question with regard to the statute is. Neither does Dave Smith in the local Jones office. So we'll just have to push the two of them together and see what happens.
Okay. John, if you have any continued problems, especially Michael and I are more familiar to Mr. Brewster. So if you can't get through, let us know and we can attempt to reach him too and say,
Okay.
look, this is important to the board.
Yes, it
Please get
is.
back to John Walters.
Well, part of it may be that Mr. Brewster is resigning from Williams, McLaren and Stack, the firm he was with. I just found that out recently, so
I had heard that.
I will follow up with him. I don't think he was intending on stopping practice. So I will, as I say, I'll follow up with him once the meeting is over here and just ask if he, I don't think he's leaving that firm until the new year. So just make sure that he has this on his radar.
Okay, good. Let me know, would you? So I'm not
Yeah,
trying
okay,
to push
sure.
him also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, moving to the organizational climate survey results. Before the pandemic, we were 1 year doing a customer survey and the next year doing a staff survey. And we've gone back to doing that, and next year then we will do a customer survey and look at those results. And I primarily wanted you to see if you had questions about this or comments about this rather than going through each one. Just to summarize, I think that looking at the average results of this kind of thing, that many companies be very glad to have this level of employee engagement, but that we've got 3 particular areas of concern. 2, unfortunately, are very difficult for us to address. The 2 biggest sources of concern, if you look at both the questions and then the comments, are compensation and the lack of full-time opportunities. And that is all budget related. I'm very proud that in the time I've had here that the organization has been able to actually increase the number of full-time employees. We're up at least 6 in the last 7 years. And every time we get a little increase, we scramble around and figure out how we can try to make somebody full-time. Thank you to the county commissioners for giving us the funding for our mobile library staff. So we are cognizant of that as a gap. But it's difficult for us to do something about both of those things. I would say the other thing that looks like, just kind of looking at the whole thing really needs some consideration is communication between all levels. And I will say that Mary and I have a place where staff can reach out to us anonymously if they want to, and nobody ever does. I think I've had one comment this year. We open the door, but then we don't necessarily hear comments come up. So in some cases, people feel like they need to talk more with their branch manager. In other cases, there seems to be some gap that is felt between administration and frontline staff. So, you know, we regularly post on the staff intranet from administration about what's going on. So in some cases, I think that a perceived gap is just that there's not as much news coming from administration. You know, I think we tell everybody that's anything that's going on as soon as we can. In some cases, I was a little disappointed by some of these comments. For example, a number of people said, well, we didn't do pride displays. Yes, we did. How come you didn't know? We allowed people to do displays for Banned Books Week. So there's, in some cases, there may be just some concern that we're not doing enough in those areas, but I would also point out that we have a history of some problems related to that. And we know what county we live in, so we just have to be careful with how we do some things. So overall, I'm very pleased with most of this. And when it comes down to staff feeling that their work is valuable, that they enjoy most aspects of working at the library, that we give good customer service, that, I mean, those are almost 100% positive. I will say, I mean, these are completely anonymous, but the one person who thought that the library's mission did not make their work seem valuable probably needs to find another place to work. Really? Okay, that was a surprise to me that even one person said that working in the library didn't make their work seem valuable. But we will work to work on the main areas that seem to be problematic. Communication is always an issue in an organization. So I just wanted to open up to your thoughts and comments on this.
Michael, if I can make some suggestions again, since I'm coming off the board, I'll never see one of these reports again. I think it's too much. I think it's too detailed, too many questions. And I think that's maybe impacting the number of people who respond. I would encourage you to look at the questions. Can we reduce them? Are there some redundancies? There are even some questions like, I think 37 and 41, which really aren't talk about community reaction, which really is not a question to be asking the employees. It's a question that goes to the community itself. Historically, HR professionals have always had mixed feelings about surveys, primarily because it raises expectations or anticipations. And unless you can meet those expectations or anticipations, you accelerate and create additional issues that in people's minds. And even some of the wording sort of indicate that. Well, are you doing enough to increase pay, increase salary? So I think, again, you just have to be very sensitive to the fact that when you have an issue that's an ongoing item, each and every survey, it can raise more frustration than solutions, unless we can address it to the point that it solves a problem.
There was one comment in there that I thought maybe deserved a little more attention. Somebody said something about there being so many different channels of communication that they felt if there was one stream, it would be easier to get informed and stay informed rather than checking in multiple places. At least that was how I read it. Is that worthy of looking at? See if the communication channel can be streamlined?
That would be a very difficult thing to do. So I'll talk about the three primary ways we communicate. There is the staff intranet, where frequently administration, but it could be at all different levels. So that's where we announce job openings. That's where we announce new policies. That's where, in some cases, we celebrate something. There is the Slack channel, which is used especially across branches for communication in the moment. And I don't think we can easily give up that one. I mean, if something's happening, it's a good way for us to get that word out. And the final way is in each branch, they have, for example, schedules or logs that they use to communicate something that happened. All right, this happened. People who are not here can look at that and say, okay, so this incident with a customer happened, or here's an area of concern, or here's something that we're doing about this particular thing. So yes, there are several places to look, but each one has its own purpose. And I think getting rid of any one of them, we picked up Slack primarily. Sorry, I didn't mean to do an unintentional pun there. We picked up Slack primarily during the pandemic, when we had a lot of people who might have been working remotely. I do think that it's a valuable way for people to communicate with each other in the moment. So I don't know how we're going to get rid of any one of those main three, and still try to have as much communication. And if the main complaint is there's not enough communication, then shutting down a means of communication, I think, is problematic. Can any one of them do better? If we were going to give up one, it might be Slack, but I still think that that would take away valuable communication between the branches. And so often, you know, this customer called, they want to talk to you, Michael. I see that on Slack first.
Michael, may I?
Yes, please
say
do.
something about that? We are looking at MS 365 and trying to move to that, which will combine kind of what Slack does, as well as what our intranet does, as well as what our email does, all into one platform, which will hopefully at least streamline it a little bit more. But we are working with Smyrla on that, and it's been a bit delayed, as everything else has. So that is a way that we are working towards that. There is a proponent of MS 365 that replaces Slack. There's a proponent of MS 365 that will replace our intranet so that it's all combined. So what appears on the intranet will also be accessible through email and sharing of documents and files and working files.
And the issue with that is that it's going to be delayed substantially longer. So that we just had a meeting, the three counties with Smyrla, and the contractor they had working on that project has stopped working on the project. So it's going to be some time before we see that, but we're looking for a one channel solution, as Belinda points out. It's just a question of when.
Michael, have you found that different employees prefer different avenues for communication? Like my experience, some prefer like supervisors. My experience, like some employees might prefer to hear it from their supervisor versus email versus printed.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a question we frequently ask when we're hiring, is what's your preferred mode of communication? So some people would rather talk directly with their supervisor, another person. Other people like getting information through email. I don't know that anybody says, oh, I love Slack, but yes, absolutely. And we try to foster and respect those different modes of communication.
And for clarification, Slack, how does Slack function? As like a social media platform internally?
It's more like an instant chat for everybody. So you log into Slack, and if people are going to post a message, like I just got one this morning from one of our employees who had listened to a presentation on NPR to say, all right, I listened to this and here are my thoughts on that. So again, it's kind of more like an instant message service that everybody shares.
I know that some of the employees who may have received the survey were so new that, well, I don't know the answer to these kind of questions. I just came on board. But is there anything you can think of that would possibly improve the 78, call it 79% response rate to pick up that other 20% of the employee base?
I think Jim's comment that the survey was too long would probably help with that. We did add a section specifically about equity, diversity, and inclusion. Those final 10 questions were in addition to the previous survey. So I think next time we do this, we will probably streamline it in several ways. And the first will be, we know you don't think you make enough money. There's no sense in even asking about it, really. So questions like that we'll probably simply remove, and then we'll look for areas where perhaps there's overlap between the questions and take it down in length. I think no more than probably 24, 25 questions. That might be one way. I was surprised to see that, and I don't know why of starting it, you wouldn't finish it, but I think the length may have been a sort of determining factor there.
Or maybe they didn't have any, what they felt were meaningful comments and really aired their dissatisfaction more than their satisfaction. I don't know, because I don't know who did these.
Yeah, well, we didn't look at each individual survey. It was all aggregated, and that's just part of making sure that it stays anonymous. I should point out that I've shared this with staff, but I did not share the comments because from some of them, it would be possible to can maybe identify the person saying it. So we didn't share the comments, we shared the sort of aggregated results. And I've fallen a week behind, but I have been commenting on each section on the internet and just saying, okay, here's what you said, we're hearing it, and trying to solicit some ways for staff to come forward. I mean, if we don't know about something, it's difficult for us to work on it. So, you know, communication flows two ways. If I've got this open channel and people aren't using it, it would be interesting to know why. Do they not feel comfortable talking with me? Do they, you know, where's the communication gap happening? So, and when I say talk to me and they don't, it's problematic for solving that as an issue.
So I have a few thoughts about this. I've done a lot of climate surveys in my professional life, and I'm very used to coming back to the community with news that is not always good, right? And to me, I was very surprised by the communication comments in here. And I think that sometimes we can get really focused on the methodology and think that a software or a different platform is going to solve the communication issue, when really oftentimes it's a cultural thing, right? And I think that sometimes we put forth really well-intentioned efforts, but if nobody's coming, then we got to shift tactics, right? And so that if we do have a great anonymous way to get feedback in, but no one is submitting it to it, then I think we may need to change course a little bit. I'm really happy to hear that we are circling back to the staff with this, and I'm just looking forward so I can really focus on talking to the microphone rather than pivot. But it might be helpful for us, number one, to code all of the qualitative responses so that we can identify themes, and so that we could circle back in staff meetings or branch-wide meetings to say, okay, in the open-ended comments, here are the main themes that came out, and to get input from them as to like, well, how can we improve communication? What are you talking about? Those 15 of you who said it's not effective. Were you saying that we have the wrong software? Were you saying that you never hear from leadership? Like, what is going on? Because as you said, Michael, communication is a two-way street. And I also think that when people say there's a lack of communication, that also often indicates a lack of trust to some degree. And I think that being transparent with these survey results, especially when they're bad, is actually a crucial opportunity for us to build trust and to build accountability. And so I think that while respecting privacy in all the ways you said, if we go back to the staff and say, all right, here are the top 4 categories in these open-ended responses. What do you think? How can we all do a better job? I think that might be a good chance to A, improve communication, and B, learn some things that would help us get better results in the future. And survey fatigue is very real. I think 55 questions, you peter out after 25, you close your tab and you never revisit it again. And as we know, the people who take surveys are the angriest and the happiest. So we have to take it with a grain of salt, but I think this is good, really helpful data. And I think it's an opportunity for us to respond in a way that's going to improve the climate for everybody.
Well, I guess I'd just say that I don't know that I look upon the results as bad. By and large, if you compare it to averages that are reported across industries, this is pretty darn good.
True.
But there are problem areas, and as a couple of those will be hard to address, but I think that communication thing, and I like your suggestions, that's kind of what we're hoping to do, is open some dialogue. The one reason I might have liked to have seen each individual survey is there's a striking percentage of one person, and it's 2% as one person being dissatisfied. And I wonder if you said people are really angry and people are really happy. I wonder if we had one person who just trashed the organization, and that would not be unknown to happen.
Yeah.
Well, we will continue trying to work on what we can. And unfortunately, you know, we know that there's a salary gap, and that's across the board in St. Mary's. Heard a presentation from the incoming sheriff, Steve Hall, at Rotary last week. There's like 19 vacancies in the sheriff's office. So it's, you know, the school started the school year with quite a few vacancies. We know that in some ways salaries in St. Mary's are lower than in some surrounding counties, and that is difficult to work across, in some ways, all industries down here and stay competitive. Well, I gave you the board effectiveness report, but I don't think you've had a chance to look at it. So I will save that for next month, but I thought you should see it. This came from a state grant, and your opinions were solicited on this. I don't know if any of you, responded to it, but we'll look at it next month and sort of have perhaps a discussion of areas where, speaking of communication, you think this board could act differently. We'll be going under new leadership next year, so that might be a good time to sort of start that conversation. And we'll, as I say, we'll look at this next. I did share a draft of this. It's the only digital copy I've got. I don't have a final report that's digitized. So look at it next month if that's okay with you.
Can I ask one question about this
Sure.
report? It looks very interesting. Is there any information on training resources that are available for boards to learn more about the different topic areas? This says a lot about sort of what boards feel they need training on. Is there also information on like how boards can get that training?
We can contract for it. In some cases, there may be some free modules. Smyrla, we could perhaps ask to offer some of that training as part of what they do. And they do a lot of the training. I don't think there's been an initiative at the state level to say, okay, here's board training. Citizens from Maryland Library, CML, may have some training modules that they'll offer. We'll just have to look into that for you.
Yeah, that was my question too, since I'm the newest member.
So there is an organization that's kind of like friends and boards and foundations at the state level. And they have a conference once a year. I don't know if they offer training materials. We'll try to look at that for you and see. Yes, Marianne.
My mic doesn't work. I think United for Libraries has training for boards.
That's yeah, and in
I think
fact,
the state pays for that for board members.
I'll have to look at that because they don't pay for the top level of that support. United for Libraries is the American Library Association sort of unit that looks at boards, trustees, foundations, friends, and they may offer some training as well, and we can look at that. And occasionally a training will come along from something like Library Journal. And if you're interested in that, we can start to pass those along.
I thought that training that the three of us took put on by the county attorney was good. Now, I don't think they'll drill down just for us. But I don't know if that's a regular recurring.
I think they're going to do that once a year just because they have new board members each year. And yes, I agree that was effective training, and certainly it covered some important basics, the Open Meetings Act, for example.
Now that presenter has moved on. He's out of that office and is with some other office. So he's not in the county attorney's, but I will see them, I guess, next week. I will ask if that's still going to be a recurring thing.
Well, let's go on to some action.
Mike, before you do that, though,
Yes.
again, in looking at the report, I was sort of debating, is this something we need to look at going backwards or going forward? I guess my thought was going forward more than, and you have two of us coming off. And of course, we have another vacancy as a result of resignation. Is this something you may want to really talk to the new board about? Because, and as we talked about earlier, there's going to be no changes to the board in 2023. So I think might be more valuable for the newer board, maybe give them a month or so to settle in and then really go over this, because it's something I think is a useful tool going forward for the board to operate under.
All right, well, we can certainly have a discussion in February. I mean, with new board members have a chance to see the report.
Yeah.
And make sure that they get copies of it as well. Thank you for that suggestion. We're going to start by asking for some final budget amendments for fiscal year 22. This is after the ASCII and ASCII review and the audit. So you have two sheets in here. One are budget amendments that you have already approved, and the other is a request for budget amendments. And Belinda has very handily provided a copy of last year's budget and the areas that need to be adjusted. We did have, and we'll talk about this more next month, a slight budget surplus last year. And we need to have you consider in December as when you frequently take a vote on what to do with that surplus. And there's two areas that we'll talk about. We can OPEB it, or there are going to be substantial expenses for the mobile library yet. So we will talk about the possibilities there. But these are budget lines that basically went under, and areas that we can move from to just have all the budgets balance out finally for fiscal year 22 without any debits. So I'm asking you to approve just transferring the funds. It doesn't make any difference in the overall amount or the overall audit.
Okay, I'll make the motion on the request for budget amendment. If I get a second.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments?
Which BA number are we talking about? 221030?
Yes,
And the other one has already been approved.
yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all in favor of the request, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, our next item is to look at your holiday closures for the year 2023, next calendar year. And Smyrla likes to get these back. So I'm hoping that these will meet your approval, and we can send that information to Smyrla so that they can adjust the integrated library system.
What is Defenders Day?
It's a Maryland holiday.
Why?
I don't know. I can look it up for you. I'm not from Maryland.
But we are staying open on that day. It's not a day, it's not a holiday for us.
I do have a correction on this. Good Friday is marked as a floating holiday. It is not a floating holiday, but Defenders Day is. So those two got mixed up. So just FYI.
All right, thank you for that correction.
Okay, but the primary item to vote on is really this side of the page, right? This is what we're voting on.
Yeah, yes.
We're voting on this,
No, we're
the other
voting on,
side.
we're voting on the side with the grid. That's the
Okay.
specific ones for next year.
the other
and
side is our
The
policy.
other side is what, yeah, but as Belinda says, what our policy says.
And John, Defenders Day is known as Baltimore's oldest holiday, commemorates the anniversary of the successful defense of Baltimore in 1814 and the writing of the nation's national anthem.
So when they stood off the British in Baltimore.
Okay.
The Star Spangled Banner.
Okay, so I guess my question is, are there any changes from last year or the current year?
No. This year was the first year we did Juneteenth by proclamation at the national level. But that is on for next year as well.
But you say Good Friday is now, should be closed.
No, we do not close Good Friday.
Can I ask why New Year's Day 2023 was a floating holiday, but New Year's Day 2024 is not?
Michael makes the decision for floating holidays later in the year, and those are actual floating holidays for our part-time staff. The floating holidays are for full-time staff, so sometimes depending on how the year is going, we grant it to our part-time staff at the end of the year when they fall so close to the end of the year and they fall on weekends.
And they probably will be next year. We try to be generous with our part-time staff. You know, it's, I wish we could always do more, but it will probably be, but we'll probably make that determination. And then you get to have a say in that as well.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, did we make a motion? And now I get so sidetracked.
No,
I
no,
don't think we
no
did.
motion
we didn't. I
yet.
didn't think we did. Okay, I'll make the motion then to accept the holiday schedule as provided.
Second.
Thank you, John. Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye. I don't, by the way, ask for who's opposed, because I can see everyone here, so I know
Yeah.
your response.
And just a quick note on this chart, Smyrna doesn't need to know if we're open and it's a floating holiday. They just need to know the days we're closed for the purposes of the integrated library system. Next on Friday, it says draft on it, but it can become the final version with your approval. We did get the audit. I know you haven't had a lot of time to look at it, but we shared an earlier draft with you. And we had talked about the comments we had on it and they fixed those. So the final version with your approval can look like this. And it's sort of kind of what questions do you have, or did you want to make any changes to it? I was pleased that once again there were no deficiencies, no, changes, no concern about the books that we have. Any changes that you want to make on it or questions you have about it?
On page 5, at the bottom of the third paragraph, where it says the library remains in a sound position as a wise steward of public funds, we are missing a period at the end of that sentence, or maybe an exclamation point. Anything.
Michael, what page was that?
Page 5,
Third paragraph.
third paragraph, page 5.
As long as it's not a question.
Yeah,
Anything but a question mark.
yeah, we do need a period there. So we will make that note to the auditors.
Okay, so since we do need to vote, though, I'll make the motion to accept the audit report as provided. If I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Any other questions? Any other comments?
John, I feel like you go through these with a fine tooth comb. What do you think?
I think I'd like to comb it again, but I don't want to hold up progress, so I may abstain.
Okay, any other questions then? Okay, all in favor of accepting the audit report as provided, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And we have one abstention then.
We looked at it pretty carefully and the tooth combing you gave it last year, we made sure that all those things were changed for this year. Anything that was, and in some ways, this is kind of like a form they fill in the data for each year. Two more items to go before we get to some celebrations. The first is we found out that the reason we think why we have a 35.5 hour work week, and just to note that the county does not, Calvert Library does not. Way back when there was a state stipulation that full-time was 71 hours for 2 weeks. And our policy dates all the way back to then. It has since changed. That's no longer in effect, obviously, of the county or Calvert Library or Smyrna, for example, can have a 35-hour work week. So we would like to change to a 35-hour work week. It's much easier to manage in paychecks, our administration and HR and pay system. We, when people take a week off, it's easy to do 35 hours. You just ask for 7 hours a day, which is what paychecks fills in. Then you've got to do the extra 0.5. We haven't necessarily been, we have a 7-hour work day. So there's a lot of reasons why we just want to move to a 35-hour work week instead of having that 35.5. We asked former staff, why did we do this? And the only explanation I got was we give some people a little extra time before and after they clock in or clock out, but that doesn't seem to have been something that everybody was thinking about. So we were doing it because of that former state stipulation, and we don't need to do it anymore. So we're asking for a change. Now, it will involve changing the pay scale slightly. The hourly rate for all grades. Now, only part-time employees are going to see an increase in their weekly pay. It's not that much. It would be $6,400 for 6 months. So about $12,800 for next year, roughly, possibly about 13. We did have a small budget surplus, which would allow us to I think, include that for next year as well. So basically, while by reducing 35.5 to 35, everybody's pay scale goes up a little, but full-time, you're getting the same amount. Part-time, because the pay scale has to go up a little bit, you're getting each a little bit more. So that's really going to be at the bottom level of the pay scale. And this is going to benefit not somebody like Michael Blackwell, director, but people, our pages, our part-timers. So I'd like you to approve this as a change.
Okay, I'll make the motion then again to approve the proposed salary scale adjustment for fiscal year 2023. I get a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments? I know we've talked about this before too. But, okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
And the next one is all up to you. We are meeting here in the lovely Lexington Park Library, and we will continue to meet in libraries for the next undetermined amount of time. And we'll live stream it to YouTube and basically be on the library channel and not the county channel. We used to meet on Tuesday mornings at 10. And when we were told you have to sort of live stream your meetings and the county is going to do it for you, we had to move because that's when the county commissioners meet. So now, however, it's wide open for you to choose the sort of day and time you would like to meet. And previously you had talked about possibly moving to an early evening meeting, say 5:30 to 7 or something like that. However, this is very much up to you. Is there a particular day and time that you would like to meet once a month? And the county does want to know because they put that on their schedule.
Plus, it opens up that room for something else they might want to do.
Oh, yeah, they're very pleased to have the room. But yeah, I said they don't have any problem with us doing it ourselves. And I should point out that the school board and Metcom both do it on their own property with their own, feeds. So, this is no issue as far as the county is concerned. It's really more just when would you like to meet?
Should we wait for the new board members to have this conversation?
The county would like to know before the new year. I can give them, leave it as is, but it's tentative, but they'll want to know exactly when as soon as they can.
Will the new members be with us in the December meeting or no?
They should be notified before the December meeting happens.
But our current folks are still serving at the December meeting.
Yeah, all right, well, if you would like, I'll just tell the county that tentatively it is like that and we'll let them know about a change.
I thought I was going to abstain because it doesn't affect me. I'm coming off the board. So it's really more of a decision for the current board. So what that definition of current board is it all of you here or is it the new members as well? I have to leave it up to you because.
I know
Not
for me,
impact.
evenings are very difficult. I'm teaching every evening, so it's just swamped.
In my case, I can do mornings or late afternoon, early evening.
And I'm good on the day, the Monday. What are we, the third Monday now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good for me. But I do have some mornings and evenings that I'm already involved in.
So
But they
perhaps,
don't happen on this day, third
Yeah.
Monday.
so maybe we can pencil in our current meeting date and stick with what has worked thus far.
All
Tentatively.
right, well, the part of the aim for considering evenings was to possibly open up board membership to people who are still working.
Mhm.
But we will keep it the same for now and note that in January, when the new board is here, that there may be a change. And if board members who are going to be going on, if you could think for January of times and days that definitely are no good, that might be helpful. So, I too have, I'm on 4 boards and those tend to meet in the evening. So there'll be like one day a month I couldn't do it as well. So we'll get it all worked out.
And I'm on one evening board and I've noted that we do pick up. I think the attendance is mostly driven by people who come off work as opposed to the people on the board who are retired.
Okay.
Logistically, would you be set up for meetings? I know we were supposed to meet at Leonardtown even today and we switched here because it's previously set up for the election.
We will be ready to have meetings whenever you would like to have them. Staff are flexible enough and can adjust schedules, and we will, as necessary, be ready to go.
Shall we try out Leonardtown next time? Will it be?
No,
Meyer?
Lexington Park next time. I was hoping for Leonardtown next time, but we still have some improvements to make there. After 2 years of kind of should have been ready, the sound system there is still not finished. So we are after the county to please get that. I should thank Commissioner Colvin, who, when we had difficulties at one of our public forums, for the election, there was some difficulties with one of them saying, well, if you need to upgrade your systems, please include that in your budget request for next year. So we'll be doing that as well. We might want to get some of these nice little things at our other libraries as well. Well, with that being said,
Michael, before you then go to the next, which is the celebrations, I do have one item I've got to mention to you for the agenda. We need to elect officers. And of course, it's always best to have officers in place in January. So it really means electing those officers in December. So what we typically do, and I was going to ask Janice to be sort of the conduit, but she's not here today. So I'll take on that role. If you would let me know if you have an interest in the presidency, vice presidency, or treasurer function. All I will simply do is to collect those and share them with you at the December meeting. I make no judgments or assessments. So if you would let me know by email, if you have an interest in any one of those three positions for 2023. Okay, Michael.
All right, well, we have 3 hip hip hoorays today, and Jim, I'll need you to sign those before you go,
Okay.
if we could. And they are very much in some ways a response to the organizational climate survey, where it's like, well, you know, librarians get a lot of recognition, but your frontline staff doesn't always. And so the branch managers heard that, and Mary Ann heard that and said, well, let's start recognizing just a few people who on a day-to-day basis, without necessarily doing anything that is individually noteworthy, you know, that one thing you did is wonderful. Just every day come with a positive attitude, support their fellow staff members, are always upbeat, are great people to work with. So, and that's Brian Youngs, who works here at Lexington Park, for sharing his positive outlook with staff and customers, outstanding customer service, and willingness to creative solve problems and delight our customers in the branch and on social media. So Brian, thank you so very much. For Naomi Cole, for always striving to have and share a positive attitude, sharing your knowledge with fellow staff, and providing outstanding customer service. And Brianna Thorne, for always going above and beyond what is called for her, for being continually supportive of our staff and lending a hand when needed. And lastly, always being willing to step up and volunteer for committees and duties. So thank you to 3 people who are essential for the success of St. Mary's County Library. And with that, that's
Which branches are they from?
Brian is here at Lexington Park. Naomi is at
Paul,
Hall, and Brianna is at
Leonardtown.
Leonardtown. So yeah, so one from each. And I'm sure as we go on, we'll be recognizing these people more. We do present, in addition to the certificate, just a small token of appreciation, which is typically a $5 gift card to Dunkin' Donuts. So I will be sending back Brian's via interoffice mail with his $5 Dunkin' Donut gift certificate. And I will know that that is not an expense that the library covers. Somebody else picks that up. So that's what I have.
Okay. Any other items, issues from the board that need to be brought up?
One question just about the director evaluation procedurally. I asked the board members to submit the documents to me. Thank you for, I think almost everybody has. And so I will work with Jim on compiling and synthesizing those, and we'll go from there.
Will you need a closed session to meet on that or not?
I don't believe so. I think we can do this over email and, in the document itself.
Okay, as long as you're not meeting, we're fine.
Yes, yes.
Okay, anything else? Okay, if not, the meeting is adjourned.